Welcome to the Infographics channel. Today we will discuss two infographics about forests, 15 countries with the largest forest area, and percentage of forests in the world, published by Visual Capitalist. The authors of the infographics are Pallavi Rao, Marcus Liu, and Sam Parker. From the first infographic we learn that forests cover 40 million square kilometers, or 1/3 of the land on Earth, and 70% of all forests are located within the borders of 15 countries presented in the infographic. Below the graphic there is a note about the Amazon rainforest, which covers 6.7 million square kilometers in total in 9 South American countries, 5 of which are featured in the infographic. Amazon forests constitute 17% of the world's forests. Countries with the largest forest area are ordered from right to left. Let's start with the country with the most forests on Earth. Russian Federation, 8 million square kilometers. 20% of the world's forests. Every fifth tree in the world grows in Russia. If you study forestry, like picking mushrooms, are a lumberjack or a hunter, take a serious interest in learning Russian, I recommend everyone to fly over Russia on a regional airline. After flying from Moscow towards the north or east, the windows can see forests to the horizon. It's impressive. Just like the view from the hills located among taiga forests. Forests to the horizon. Russia is the only European country in this infographic. Europe is the most agricultural continent in the world, as stated in the video about arable land published on this channel in March 2024 and still valid. Next is Brazil. 5 million square kilometers. Including most of the Amazon rainforest. And here's an interesting fact. It is commonly believed that the rainforests of the Amazon and other equatorial regions, e.g. the Congo Valley or the island of Borneo, are forest formations that have been there for a very long time and that humans have only recently entered these areas, apart from the scattered gathering tribes inhabiting the tropical forests. Recent archaeological research using LiDAR technology contradicts these claims. LiDAR is a type of laser that allows you to scan the terrain without dense vegetation. Thanks to this technique, researchers discover urban complexes that are new to science, city ruins scattered throughout the Amazon forests, covered with dense jungle. It is not known exactly how old these human settlements are, but it is known that they existed before they were abandoned and overgrown with tropical jungle. Vegetation in the equatorial zone is very intense. Species richness is the highest in the equator area compared to other climatic zones. However, it is a myth that humans have only recently been intervening in these areas, as evidenced by the discovery of ruins located in tropical forests in various Latin American countries. The ruins discovered in the Upano Valley in Ecuador date back to approximately 2,500 years ago. I wonder how long you think it would take for nature to recreate the tropical jungle in the area of today's Manaus agglomeration, located in the heart of the Amazon, if people had left the city? Write in the comments. Scientists are examining the rate of vegetation recovery at a natural disaster site in Washington State, USA, where Mount St. Helena was swept away in a volcanic eruption in 1980, but also at other volcanic eruption sites. After 26 years, vegetation covers from 30 to 70% of the area, first pioneer plants appear, then other species, and finally the forest will return. The return of life to the area after the eruption of the Krakatau volcano in Indonesia, just like the Amazon, located on the equator, which destroyed the island in 1884, has been studied for a long time. The remains of the island, where lava destroyed all forms of life, became a research ground. After 100 years, the species composition of plants and animals was almost identical to that of other islands in this region. This would mean that after 100 years, nature returns to its previous state, even in completely destroyed areas. Canada has the third largest forest area, 3.5 million square kilometers. It is mainly taiga and coniferous forests. The largest forest cover in the world per capita. A paradise for lumberjacks. You can chop without remorse. But be careful. The United States has almost the same amount of forests. The country with the most powerful economy in the world. Please remember this when you come across statements such as, the economic development of a given region will allegedly lead to the thinning of forests. The United States has made a huge civilizational leap over several hundred years, and this has not prevented it from remaining the fourth largest forest area on the planet in terms of forest area. Much of the credit goes to Alaska, where every fifth tree in the United States grows. Almost all houses and lower buildings in Canada and the United States are built of wood and wood panels. China, 5th place. The author's annotation mentions that since 1990, when the government decided to increase the country's forest cover, 647,000 square kilometers of forests have increased in China, which is twice the area of Norway. And here's my attention. Today, China and the United States are two world economic powers, highly industrialized countries. In addition, China is the country with the largest population, next to India. They did not completely destroy these forests, but they built so many factories, highways and cities. To put it simply, every 20th tree in the world grows in China. Statistically, one Chinese has more forest area at his disposal than, for example, one German. The next infographic presents the countries in the world that recorded the greatest increase in forest cover between 2001 and 2021. China is a pioneer here. Australia is next. 1.3 million square kilometers. Here's the author's note: 3/4 of Australia's forests are made up of eucalyptus trees, which have extremely flammable bark. I will make my point here. The mere fact that forest fires occur in some areas is not negative information. In some geographical zones, e.g. the Mediterranean basin or the taiga, pyrophytes occur. Pyrophilic plants need fires to develop. The idea is to obtain the critical temperature at which the seed gains the ability to germinate. From now on, when you hear that forests are burning in California or near Vancouver, please do not panic. For these forests, it may be necessary to reproduce new generations of trees. In the past, these processes occurred as a result of lightning discharges. Today, the number of human-caused fires is too high, and even for pyrophytes it is not necessary on such a scale. I do not approve of setting forests on fire. However, the phenomenon of fire itself for pyrophilous plants is necessary for the extension of the species. Urban planning in areas where we want to protect pyrophytes should take into account the tolerance of fire from time to time and the location of buildings so that they are not at risk of fire. Democratic Republic of the Congo. This African equatorial country changes its name frequently. It used to be called Zaire. Forest area 1.2 million square kilometers. Almost the same as in Australia. Indonesia is 9th. Here comes the author's note that Indonesia has lost 20% of its forests since 1990, mainly due to the expansion of the cultivation of palm oil species that are responsible for 4.5% of Indonesia's GDP. And in fact, in some places, large forest areas are being cleared and turned into palm plantations for palm oil. The question arises whether these are still forests in the records. The spots are trees. The problem is that these are forest monocultures, i.e. one species of tree is cultivated and a great diversity of rainforest species is lost. There are materials available on the internet showing, for example, a family of orangutans losing their habitat and orphaned baby monkeys. Orangutans are great apes, and that is why this species reaches our emotions more strongly when it is harmed. If orangutans lived in U.S. forests and fell from oak trees during logging, residents of other countries would probably call us barbarians when they saw such videos. But orangutans are dead in the USA and we can safely conduct forest management. Squirrels can fall from trees, but it doesn't get much media coverage. Without downplaying the problem, I would like to point to the United States as a country that has achieved enormous economic development and preserved its forests. This sine wave of development cycles also applies to other countries. Indonesia will also reach a stage of development where forest protection becomes a higher priority than palm oil production. And in my opinion it will happen sooner rather than later. Please watch Chinese government television. A country that 20 years ago ignored environmental protection standards in all fields, today, after achieving a sufficient level of wealth in society, is able to explain to its citizens that nature should be protected and preserved for future generations. People have specific priorities, and satisfying more basic needs enables the implementation of higher goals, such as the protection of cultural and natural assets. This will be the case in all countries as long as we allow them to get richer. And it's going to hurt a little along the way. Nature will suffer, unfortunately, because for most people their own material needs come before the protection of other forms of life. 10th position, India, 724,000 square kilometers of forests. This is equivalent to 2 areas of Great Britain. We return to South America, Peru, 721,000 square kilometers. These are mainly Amazonian forests located on the eastern side of the Andes. Angola is the second African country on today's list, neighbor of the Democratic Republic of Congo. 660,000 square kilometers. Like Peru, Angola is a country where we can visit equatorial forests and deserts in one day. Places from 12th to 15th are occupied by Latin American countries, Mexico, Colombia, Bolivia, and Venezuela, with forest areas ranging from 655,000 square kilometers to 461,000 square kilometers. With the exception of Mexico, these are mainly Amazon forests. The species diversity of plants, fungi and animals of equatorial forests is stunning. It is estimated that the equatorial zone is inhabited by 80% of land species on Earth. The societies of these countries already realize that this is wealth for the future. I don't mean wood, but primarily genetic richness. Pharmaceutical companies are in a race for active substances obtained from certain specific species. And since the number of species in the equatorial zone is the largest in the world, the potential for discovering new drugs based on them is also the greatest. While in Peru, I met a local scientist collecting information on folk medicine based on local herbs. This scientist worked as a freelancer for a European pharmaceutical company. Finally, I would like to point out that among all these 15 countries, where 70% of the world's forests grow, I do not see any country that is unstable. Well, perhaps apart from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which was destabilized as a result of various external interference. But the situation is rapidly improving in this country as well. Please see, Russia, Brazil, regional economic powers. Canada and Australia, highly developed countries. The United States and China, world economic powers. Indonesia and India are Asian powers. Peru, Angola, Mexico, Colombia, Bolivia, to varying degrees but stable. Venezuela is emerging from the crisis, but it has not threatened forest resources. Therefore, it is not visible that in 70% of the world, forests are under systemic threat due to the weakness of the state, the need to cut them down for economic reasons, and so on. The largest tracts of forest are in the hands of stable governments and ambitious societies. Finally, I will show you an infographic presenting the countries where the most forests were lost in the years 2001 to 2021. In my opinion, in this case it is better to look at the percentage decrease in forest area. This coefficient better reflects the scale of the phenomenon and allows detecting the threat. The countries from the list of countries with the highest forest cover can also be found on this infographic: Brazil, Democratic Republic of Congo, Angola, Indonesia, Bolivia, Colombia, Peru. They have lost between 4 and 14% of their forests in the last 20 years. Greater losses were recorded in Paraguay and Sudan, 30 and 37% respectively. These values indicate predatory forest management. In the case of Paraguay, it mainly concerns the Chaco forest communities in the western part, cleared for cattle breeding. Sudan mainly cuts down forests in the south, planted in the 1940s. I encourage you to watch the remaining materials from this series. Regards.